We're going to go through this Russia/Ukraine conflict, and we want to start with the timeline of the conflict. How exactly did we get here? And then going into what is the end game, and obviously what a lot of people are concerned about and talking about right now, which is a very sobering idea and concept to even think about, but the prospect of nuclear being involved in this in these war games at all whatsoever. We have one of the great, nuclear powers, including ourselves, that is like involved to some degree in this conflict, and we need to talk about that. Although it is scary, we need to unpack it. Obviously, that then next leads to the China angle and Taiwan and the digital yuan. And then we really want to transition gears about halfway through the episode to talk about the crypto angles that are related to this conflict. So first of all, we're recording this on March 1st right now. We had crazy a crypto market crash last week. Now we're on a bit of a bull run compared to the general market. What the fuck is going on? We want to talk about interventions, crypto banks turning into banks and getting requests, and talk a little bit also about the US media narrative right now around crypto and how that may or may not shift in relation to everything that's going on with Russia. The power of crypto for individuals is showing. We're going to talk about that and the importance of owning your keys and your hardware and some of the kind of concerning stuff that's been going on around centralized exchanges and really the importance of being in control of some form of asset when a conflict or situation or existential thing like this pops up. So that's the agenda, and that's by popular request. And so many of you DGens are asking for an agenda, and I will play that role of really trying to keep us on track today on that agenda, and we'll go from there. A few quick housekeeping items. Nick, what is this here? Oh yeah, why don't you start with that, Nick?
Yeah, so we got a cool review. I think it was just last week from a good friend and listener, Amin Manik. He said, "I'm personally enjoying the way Armand, Stephen, Nick, and Eric challenge the status quo every week. I feel like I'm sitting at the dinner table discussing ideas and learning along the way. It's genuine. That's hard to come by without being, overproduced these days." So big shout out to Amandeep for the review. And I know he probably had some more digs and comedy to throw in there, but he was probably being nice. But anyway, you can follow him at @amanic on Twitter. But thanks for the shout out, my friends, and guys, keep them coming.
Oh my God, he's gonna love that. You just dropped his handle.
Yeah.
He's gonna love that. He's got a great little handle. Everybody, check him out. And I think he's going to play a very important critical role actually in our community in general. He's one of our best friends, and he's honestly I would just call him a product and marketing phenomenon expert. Speaking of our community, what I'm referring to is our Discord. So we've been teasing this for a while now, right, guys? Talking about like whether we want to do a Telegram and telling you to DM us on Twitter. We are ready to open up our Discord. We just got that all set up. I dropped the link on our website at alfalfapod.com. So just head to alfalfapod.com. That link is also in the description wherever you're watching or listening. And there should be a link to the Discord community. You'll be able to join right away, and it's going to be popping off. That's going to be literally just the place, the main place. You want to talk to us. You want to brainstorm things. You want to get the alfalfa in between episodes. You want to share your own alfalfa. That's the place you go. So we're really, really pumped about this. And we're really starting to just invest more and more in you guys in the community as well. So a couple of areas where we need a little bit of help, actually. So a quick ask for you guys is one of the things that takes us a lot of time is creating these clips after we record these episodes. We have to sit down and listen. It's honestly been Mr. CFA Eric doing all the hard work behind this, sitting and listening to the episodes in full and then finding the little gems. So if you're a listener who's been listening or watching and you're noticing really great gems that you think could turn into clips, that's an area that we need help with right now, is just helping us figure out which things to clip, like which parts to pull out. So hit us up in the Discord if that's something you want to do, or if in general you want to help us out with the podcast in any way. We're here for it. We're super down for it. All right. Anything else before we dive into the alfalfa round? I think that's the housekeeping.
I think that rocks it.
All right. So this is going to be, by the way, we did this for the first time in the last episode. This is going to be a thing we generally do. We're going to start every episode with this alfalfa round as long as you guys continue finding it helpful. And the purpose of this is to give you all the juice up front, do a lightning round of everything we've been doing, buying, selling, and the latest alfalfa in general that we've uncovered. So Nick can kick it off.
Yep. Cool. So one thing I've been noticing is Lido, which is a way for you to participate in staking your ETH and earning a yield. Instead of setting up your own validator and putting in 32 ETH, you can stake it with Lido. They kind of pool all the ETH together and handling the staking, take a 10% rip, I believe. But anyway, I've been noticing they've been moving up the charts when it comes to DeFi apps in terms of total value locked. So on all the DeFi charts, they're number 3, but in Ethereum, they are number 8. And they're the biggest mover in the top 25 in the last month. So up 20%, about 6 billion locked on Ethereum, just behind Compound, it looks like. And so I think the market is starting to appreciate that the merge is coming later this year and getting prepared for some juicy yields. So just what I'm doing is kind of looking at the next 3 months and trying to strategically sell off a lot of the NFT assets back to ETH, hoping for a nice bull run in ETH the rest of the year. Don't really expect that my NFTs to really outperform ETH and want to get it in line for those juicy yields. So listing a lot of things for sale, not fire selling, giving myself 3 months to do it. But I think the merge is scheduled for June, July. So I don't know, put it August, September, October when it actually happens. But it'd be nice to kind of get in there before this thing happens and the yields kind of jump to like 10% and everyone wants in. So that's the move this week, been staging and setting up for the next 3 months.
Oh yeah, that's juicy. And you did it in 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Ooh, I'm trying to lead by example.
Steven, are you going to be able to? We gave Steven 4 minutes. We'll see how it goes. All right, Eric.
Okay, so I'm maybe not as bullish as Nick in the immediate term on ETH. So I'm actually looking to pool my ETH with something else, like maybe a stable coin, maybe something like where I can mute the volatility of ETH. So what I'm looking at is a protocol called Notional Finance, and that's a ticker symbol NOTE. This is like one of the few protocols I've seen where you can like borrow and lend with fixed rates, and that's currently offering 8% on lending. And this is very important for like institutions who have like portfolios they're trying to manage to specific outflows or whatever. They have about $500 million locked in their protocol, and the market cap on this token is only $8 million. It's like a micro cap. I think there's upside here. So I pooled ETH and the note token, earning something like an 85% yield. I'm pretty bullish on the note token, but this is going to be a good segue to Steven, because I've kind of learned over time to like avoid DeFi tokens in general, like these ones that particularly pay users because they're like so inflationary. They're kind of like designed to go down in price over time. But this note token is like in the dumpster. Like it was down it was $20 at one point. Now it's $1. And I just think there's like massive utility on Notional, the protocol. So I'm sort of playing it that way. But I am wary, like this is not like a long-term hold for me. I'm wary of DeFi coins in general. And I think that's kind of a good segue, because the DeFi Lord here can maybe like talk about how like a protocol can create value to their token from, just pure utility.
Is that my cue?
That's you, baby.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody knows how to create a DeFi token with pure utility at this point. It's just a lot of narratives and memes. It's a real minefield out there for sure. So my best advice for people is to not fall in love with farm tokens. I'm in kind of survival mode right now for the most part. So I'm like very heavy stables, very heavy ETH, very heavy Bitcoin. And I'm just sort of using all of those things as collateral to farm and trying to take like as little directional risk when I farm as possible, right? So when I see these protocols pop up where you get like 90,000% APR on like, the Moon token pair or something, I kind of stay away from it because those rates are sort of a trap. Every once in a while, though, you get a good farm that pops up. The last week in DeFi, it's been all about the solid exchange. Andre Cronier's latest project. So that launched on Phantom last week too.
Solid or solidly? What is it? Yeah, it's like
solid.
Maybe
The token is called
solid.
the token is called solid.
Okay.
So we'll go with that. Honestly, it's been a complete shit show. There were smart contract bugs across multiple protocols. Nobody could figure out how to use the damn swap, and people were farming through a convex type proxy called was it the sex token solid?
he was afraid to say
solid X. Yeah, it's a good meme.
Solid X sex.
Yeah, I mean, basically everything in the Phantom ecosystem pumped super hard that had farm rewards for this swap. I mean, honestly, it's a bit confusing to explain it to people in 4 minutes because there's a complex sort of token locking mechanism that sort of mimics how Curve tokens are locked, but it does it in a slightly different way. So Curve like incentivizes people to buy the token to vote on rewards for particular gauges. So you may have like a stablecoin pair in Curve that's earning like, a 20% yield to LP it. But most of that yield in Curve typically comes from the token rewards. It doesn't actually come from the swap fees. So you end up in these weird scenarios on Curve where a lot of the token power is directed to pools that don't support a lot of trading volume. So it's kind of like a weird, which isn't helpful from the user's perspective. As a user, you want there to be deep liquidity where you trade so that you get minimal slippage when you trade. But the tokenomics model is sort of just incentivizing new protocols to sort of like grab bag users by voting on their gauge and dishing out rewards, sometimes for pools that aren't really used. So Solid basically tweaks this mechanism a little bit without going into too many details. It sort of incentivizes people to vote on pools where there is going to be trading volume, thus delivering like a better experience for the users, who use the platform. I'm not actually sold that this meme is going to be a reality. It's possible it is. The exchange is supposed to go like multi-chain and blow up to the billions of dollars. I'm not sure if that's happening. The yields have been very good because there was like a smart contract bug that dumped all the rewards like in like the first week or two, basically. Oh. So I've been farming like 4 or 5% a day on there since Thursday or so. It's been pretty wild. But yeah, there's a new round of rewards coming out on Thursday. There's all these kind of battles going on between protocols over this. It's pretty wild, and again, it probably deserves its own podcast, honestly. But after that, I know that the capital is probably going to be rotating to the Metis chain, which is sort of like a pseudo ETH layer 2. They're sort of doing their own fork of solid swap on there. So I'll be keeping an eye on that, possibly rotating capital. But yeah, it's mostly me just moving ETH and stables around and trying to farm a bunch of yield using those and just trying to stack cash and be defensive until things kind of look better in the markets, which I'm not really sold on yet, although we had quite the God candle there yesterday. So
yeah. Well, we definitely have to talk about that. Nice, Steven. That's the new all-time high. I like it.
Yeah, new high score.
Are you curious your score?
Did you time him? You had the clock on him?
I had the clock on. I promised you guys I would clock it. It's for the listener. No, it was good. 4.5. I let you go over. Wow. Well, we definitely have to talk about that. We're going to dive into this Russia-Ukraine conflict. I will say before we dive in, a quick shout out to Collective Shift. So Collective Shift recently started doing a 14-day free trial just to open up the whole membership to anybody, anywhere, at any time for free. And everything that we're talking about on this podcast, almost essentially everything, is covered by the research analysts at Collective Shift, plus the fact that you get the community. So what I would personally do if I was listening and just generally wanting to get deeper into crypto is I would join our Discord, first of all, very important. So that's at alfalfapod.com. But to take it further, check out the free trial, check out Collective Shift, because there's a fuck ton of resources in there and everything you need to get started. But really the whole concept is to take somebody from beginner to like helping them with their portfolio and scaling the whole thing out all the way. And we actually launched our own portfolios at Collective Shift. We now have 3 portfolios that we ourselves, because I am Chief Growth Officer, everybody should know that already, I believe, at the company. But we have now a short-term portfolio, trading portfolio, a long-term growth portfolio designed to beat Bitcoin over 5 years, and an NFT portfolio that we launched last week, which is really fucking exciting. So we're buying our own NFTs and displaying everything, like full transparency, which is really, really exciting. I'm really pumped about a lot of the stuff we're doing. So anyway, links to that below, but make sure to use the Alfalfa code at checkout. So when you go to the free trial, even though it's free, plug in our code Alfalfa and you'll get another month free, another month at 50% off after that. So yeah, little gift from us. All right, guys, let's dive into this. And link.
Wait,
to
where's
that,
your alfalfa? Was that your alfalfa?
Oh, fuck. I didn't even do it.
Maybe that was.
Maybe that is
pure
Maybe
alfalfa.
I want to know yours.
That might be it. Okay. Mine's very simple.
Yeah, what are you doing?
I bought Bitcoin every day last week while this whole chaos was ensuing. I mean, there's many reasons I did that, but in particular, I wanted to up my allocation of Bitcoin. Obviously, that's why I chose Bitcoin instead of Ethereum. I'm almost like 65% Ethereum now, but I wanted to juice up the Bitcoin allocation. And I basically bought every day that there was a dip below. God, where are we even at right now?
Well, shit, you're up 15%.
Yeah,
on all those buys.
Good, and I think a lot of people expected this to continue. I as well did. I expected this to just crash to shit and go to like really, really all-time lows for this current run. But I was like, I'm gonna buy with the cash I have every day and spread it out over a 5 to 7 day period. And I'm glad I did, because I'm up 10-15% already.
Yeah.
I haven't touched my NFTs, but actually what you shared, Nick, was pretty helpful for me, because I was trying to figure out what my window is on a lot of the NFTs that I don't want to hold for more than the next month or two. And I think that's really my window, is the next month or two. I'm not going to fire sale them, but I am personally a little bit worried about the illiquidity there. And I generally want to get out and get back into ETH on some of these things and just hold on to, honestly, a handful. Maybe I can count them on my hand of NFTs. Right. I've been frustrating probably Steven with my SpaceX NFT questions that I message him every once in a while. But like that whole thing that Steven dropped as an Alfalfa drop like 3 episodes ago is so goddamn confusing. It's such a shit show. But to Steven's point, like easy money doesn't come easy. This is probably going to be worth it. The whole thing is a bit of a clusterfuck in terms of like how you qualify for the NFT. Is SpaceX even involved, and so on and so forth. So to summarize it, I did purchase the Rafiq, what's his name, Steven? Rafiq Anadol NFT.
I didn't consult them on the pronunciation. That's just
I did purchase it
Phonetic.
at like 0.76 ETH. It's down to like 0.5, 0.4. And the snapshot happens at the end of March now, is what they apparently are saying. So I'm holding it, and I'm cautiously optimistic. But the real alfalfa there is just how confusing that has been, and how difficult I can only imagine that is for any NFT newbie to figure out. We are still so early with this stuff. That's what I learn every time I see something like this. I'm just like, there is no way the average everyday person is going to figure this stuff out until Coinbase launches their NFT platform and it becomes more centralized and more streamlined in terms of how to qualify for these white lists, because otherwise it's really difficult. And then last but not least, my little second iPhone experiment is going really well. I dropped this at the very end of, was it the last one? But basically on the weekends, I use a second iPhone with only a few apps on it. And that has done wonders for my ability to just decompress and get away from the news and not mistake. I think I was conning myself into saying that social media is not the news. It's just a way to connect with my friends and keep up my social media profiles. But that's bullshit. It is really overwhelming. And I look forward to it now. And I've started to start, kind of doing it a little bit sooner. I think last week I did it on Thursday night, switch the SIM card over. And it's just like a sense of, just the things I need and only the things I need. And over time, as I said, I hope to have more time on that alternate phone with no apps on it versus the main one.
You seem a little more grounded. I'll give you that.
Thank you. Well, today was a crazy day though. Today was crazy, but yeah, it does help a lot. All right, guys, we got to talk about what's going on with this conflict. And the real question is, how did we get to this place where Russia has a problem with Ukraine in the first place? And, let's find the tail. Let's find the origin if we can, without going back to the beginning of time. Right. How did we get here?
So I think it's good to kind of go back to when Russia invaded originally in 2014. So Ukraine was on its path to making an agreement with the EU to have some kind of economic association. And it's important to note that it wasn't even a NATO membership that was part of the consideration. It was just EU association. And at the time, there was a pro-Russian president, Yanukovych. So there's a pro-Russian government in place, and he gets pressured by Putin to shut it down. So he shuts it down. Massive protests ensue to the point where he has to flee. And he flees to Russia. Russia then invades eastern Ukraine, annexes Crimea. And, Ukraine was really trying to, like most of the Eastern Bloc over the last 30 years, is kind of was on this path to choosing, democratic politics, open market economics, kind of moving more towards the West. And it seems like Putin views this and any gravity towards the West, and specifically NATO, as threatening their future as a nation. And he calls it their historic future because he thinks, Ukraine and that Eastern Bloc is all part of Russia historically. But anyway, like a week ago, he declares that, Russia can't feel safe. It can't develop. It can't even exist from what he sees as a constant threat from modern Ukraine, with the fear that as Ukraine goes more towards the West, maybe, it has a tighter association with NATO. And in some of these newer Eastern Bloc countries, we have defenses and missiles and weaponry that we put along Russia's border. And I think he viewed that as almost like an existential threat if Ukraine started moving that way. So obviously he invades, he starts, moving in troops, starts putting 200,000, troops on the border, goes in, and a lot of people are trying to ask what is his ultimate goal. And I think it is that he wants the bordering countries to gravitate more towards Russia than the West. And specifically, he's made specific requests. He wants Ukraine, no Ukraine in the European Union, specifically not in NATO. I mean, he's even made some crazy requests. Like he wants NATO to roll back to 1997, which is 14 new country members ago. So for the West and NATO, it's a non-starter. But it's kind of interesting because he's made his worst fears come true. I think just 2 days ago, Ukraine submitted an application to the EU. Yeah. And now NATO is more united than ever. I think he thought that he was going to pick off some NATOs and fracture NATO to kind of be at odds against each other over sanctions, specifically with Germany relying on their energy. I think 50% of their energy on Russia. But in fact, everyone's united now. Germany's even promised to increase military budgets, what they historically haven't met their 2% minimum that NATO kind of requires. And then even have middle of the road countries like Finland considering NATO membership. So that's like a brief timeline of events and kind of historically how Putin views this threat and the move towards the West. And we could talk about the end game in a second, but in general, I think he's kind of making some of his worst fears come true now. So he's probably pretty pissed off right now. And I think he's having the opposite effect of what he was originally going for.
Well, how much of this do you think is his sort of story about we don't want border nations in NATO, we don't want missiles on our border, versus you saw the speech he gave last week, right? That like kind of hour-long
It's a historical rant, right?
Yeah, like he was like really like shitting on Lenin, and he was like yearning for like the old Russian Empire, even, right? Not even like he wasn't even talking about Soviet stuff, right? It sounded like he was just sort of motivated by like some sort of like higher like historical greatness of like reuniting Russia, almost like a resume item for him to be, Vlad the Great or something someday, as opposed to like so I wonder how much of the NATO thing is like legitimate versus like it's like sort of like a front and like we kind of be here anyway,
I mean, I think he views Ukraine as a nation founded by Russian ideals, and he thinks it's like this country that's now overrun by terrorists, right? That are overrun by. I mean, he thinks
the propaganda with the Nazism as well is really confusing to me. Like
so much conflict in the ideas, because at the same time he views Ukraine as brothers and same as the Russian people, but he's literally attacking them and killing them at the same time. Right. So, I do think there is some kind of wanting to go back to Soviet Russia and have this block of countries that kind of rivals NATO and rivals their worldview. But I do think he thinks about, having intermediate ballistic missiles on the western border of Russia, and in terms of in the near term, but also maybe when he leaves it behind, he wants to make sure that one, there's security for Russia, but also kind of chalk it up, like you said, on his resume to say he brought it back to kind of Soviet era influence.
Well, I think it could be both. Right? It's like one is not possible without the other as well. I think one is an ideal, and the other is a pragmatic, must solve existential threat. And you can't accomplish one without the other in many ways for him, and from his perspective. It's difficult to. I don't think anybody would like that, to know that there are these countries that are a part of NATO, which you are not, that represent a entirely different belief system of what like politics in general should even look like, right on your border. And I don't think he's comfortable with that. He hasn't been. He's said that repeatedly.
Wasn't NATO like originally designed for like the express purpose of containing like the Soviet Union? Correct me if I'm wrong, Nick. But then like after the Soviet Union went away, from Putin's perspective, I think like, not only did the NATO not disband, but it actually grew in terms of its like size and scope and aggressiveness. Not to excuse anything he's doing right now. It's obviously inexcusable, but I think that like people like to point to these very simple Putin he's just a bad person and he's crazy. That's why he's doing what he's doing. And we kind of write off this stuff as like, oh, he's just bad, or he's just crazy. But like he's actually a human with like motivations, and they are sort of logical from his perspective, like if they are, even if they are, evil or immoral, right? I think it's like really hard to properly diagnose the problem or figure out how to prevent it or resolve it. Like if you're just chalking up the person you're dealing with to being like a lunatic, because what do you do with a lunatic? You can't prevent them from doing anything. You can't solve anything. You can't deal with them. And then, you may lead you to the conclusion that the only thing you can do is to take them out or something, which is, you talk about dangerous escalation, which is not not something we want to have with a country that has half of all the nukes in the world, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if he's like got this madman syndrome. I think he has old school beefs, and he considers a lot of what the West has done and NATO has done as broken promises. You know, what you said, NATO originally started off as, you know, the US, Canada, and some of the main European countries like France, Germany, UK. And before the kind of Berlin Wall fell down, the Soviet Union kind of collapsed, the Secretary of State, you know, told Gorbachev, like, we won't move 1 inch east. It's kind of like a popular quote that he made. And it was part of some negotiation talks. And he kind of made that semi-promise saying, we won't move NATO 1 inch east. He goes back to like, you know, George Bush as president. And George Bush is like, no, that's not true. We're going to be open, you know, to any new members. So the Soviet Union falls apart and NATO goes to continue to add on something like 14 countries. And, you know, things like Estonia, Lithuania, that whole like Eastern bloc that either borders or nearly borders Russia. And I think he thinks like we just got played. You know, he promised Gorbachev, you know, that they wouldn't move east. You know, things fall apart and they move significantly east. And I think Ukraine is historically significant. It's also military significant due to its geography. And he's like, we're getting played and I can't let them take this even one step further. And not only do we want NATO to be associated with Ukraine, but we don't want the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian government to even just kind of fall in line with Western values, which is things like a liberal democracy, democratic politics, you know, somewhat open market capitalism. So I agree with you. I think he's somewhat of a rational actor, if you can consider that, for someone who wages war on innocent people. But in his mind, he has this rubric in which he thinks he's making kind of like, you know, chess moves that are backed by logic and risk. To Armand, to your point, you know, I think, I don't know what the equivalent would be for the US, but let's say we had some communist regime with a client state that had that was being supplied weapons and weaponry, say in Mexico, and we had it as you know, right on our border. I think we might think very similarly and think that it is some kind of existential threat to our growth and our ability to develop the country and to exist long into the future beyond, you know, when any single leader lives on, with that threat right on the border. And so obviously he's taken that to escalate. And the question is, you know, will he escalate even further? And, you know, Armand, you mentioned at the front that he's kind of litten up the nuclear deterrence. So maybe we should talk a little bit about.
Yeah. I do want to say, like, first of all, absolutely, we would view that as a threat, whether we were number 1 or number 4. Nobody wants that. I mean, if you look around the world at any country that has like any level of hostility around it, or a country that doesn't share its ideology, it's immediately a threat. It's something they want to change, whether it be through regime change or conflict or dialogue and whatever it might be. They don't like it. They want to change it. We wouldn't like it either. Nobody would like that. If Mexico or Canada or anywhere in Central America was in conflict with our ideology, it would be one of our top priorities to fix that, to change that. One of the challenges that Americans have is that they don't have the ability to see from others' perspectives. I mean, this has been written about across in history in general. Like, the concept of ethnocentrism is a very real thing. Like, the inability to look beyond your own individual perspective and to view things that way happens in an individual way as a human being and as a country in a nationalist kind of way. But to move beyond it, we cannot, like, for me, like, really, we have to highlight the fact that Putin is being extremely aggressive. He's going after civilians. This is happening intentionally. He's trying to make a statement. He's killing children. Like, that's a decision that he made, is to allow children to die. These strikes are these strikes are intentional. Everything that's happening is intentional. we can't trust everything we see on Twitter. To your point in our thread earlier, Stephen, like at all, we shouldn't trust most things we see on Twitter. But one thing that I think we do see is that a lot of the Russian military is being pushed into a situation that they didn't sign up for, and it's being driven and whipped by Putin. So it's pretty scary because it's starting to come off like, what's the win here? Like, what is the end game for him? Because it doesn't seem like there's many other paths beyond escalation. And there's a lot of interesting people covering this. I'm curious your guys' take on this. I'll just start by saying, I think it was really shocking to see someone as intelligent as Balaji, who we all admire and listen to and take his opinion very seriously, say like, hey, maybe this week you should get an Airbnb and get out of Dodge and get out of cities. I mean, that was really alarming to hear someone of his stat. And obviously there's a lot of steps before a nuclear attack, but the fact that he's saying that is really alarming. And, you know, obviously Putin has already alerted his nuclear deterrence squad or whatever, but there's a lot going on here and a lot of people are panicking. And I feel like our personal opinion on this is important and could help people.
Do you really think escalation is the most likely scenario, though?
It's not about like most likely. No,
seems like the least likely to me.
No, I just think that, as you said, it is the leading superpower with in terms of nuclear weapons, like us and them. Like that's it. Don't they have like 7,000 nukes or whatever? However many are available is up to question and arguable. But anytime that's there, it's terrifying to people, and especially he's using the language. Yeah, that's terrifying. He said it. He said, "You will be pulled into an escalation that you cannot prevent, and there will be no winners." He said that. He said that. That's terrifying.
Terrifying. And like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine escalating to like a nuclear level warfare. But like, oh man. So I have like an internal conflict. Like part of like, I want to support Ukrainian citizens. Like as a human, I want to like fly to Poland and I want to like help give out coffee and food to refugees that are fleeing. Like that's just like, I want to help them. But then as like an American citizen, I also, on the other hand, like don't want to fight, you know, like I don't want to get involved. It's not our war. And we've over the last 25 years, like gotten involved in wars that are not our wars. Obviously, if he goes nuclear, then it becomes a threat to humankind, and then I'd want to get involved immediately. But you know, like as it stands now, it's hard because like I want to help as a human being. I want to help. Eric Johansson wants to help, but I also, you know, I also don't want to risk human lives, human resource, like American lives, American resources towards this conflict that's not our issue. And but to your point though, it's like is escalation the ultimate outcome? It seems like he's all in on Ukraine, meaning like as Ukraine fights back, now he's at a level where it's like, well, he's going to fight back harder. He's got more resources. He's going to bring in heavier guns, heavier military. And it's like, he's going to take Ukraine because he can't afford to lose it now because Ukraine is now going like, well, we'll join EU, you know, like it seems like that is the outcome, at least in Ukraine.
It seems pretty likely that there's just like a lot of leverage for the EU to just be like, Ukraine won't join NATO, and then there's just some sort of thing where like he can claim like a win, you know, and back off. Like I think he's well aware that if this sort of carries out, it's not good for him, right? Like the economic sanctions that we put on them are actually pretty severe now, right? And it's going to actually trickle down to the people in their everyday lives, and there is going to be pressure on him. The oligarchs, I hear, are already putting pressure on him. So like I don't think he's necessarily going to. I think he would love like an out that like lets him save face, right? And I think the West would also like an out that like lets him save face. I think this is like, it's like a crazy game of chicken, right? Like both sides don't want to be weak, but also they're sort of acknowledge like what's going to happen if you. This is like, I mean, this is just the quintessential sort of like international politics, kind of like game theory in action here, where it's like you have to kind of do what he does and just say these ridiculous words and just threaten to sort of nuke the world, because if you don't, it gives the other side like the rope to sort of like hang you with. But it like creates this like really nasty scenario where you can like kind of have this like tit for tat escalation and the whole world blows up. So I'm kind of like interested in, what's up?
I was just saying, like for to play out the game theory, he has to do this to create some leverage. But isn't it easy to play out because going nuclear is like the ultimate race to zero. It's the ultimate negative sum game. So I think it's a bluff for sure. It's posturing, but don't you think like when you play it out, everyone knows that you can't go there, because no matter who goes there, it turns negative sum just because of how the U.S. is postured with like a triple threat of nuclear attacks.
It just doesn't matter though, because even if you think the odds are like 1 in 100,000, right? Like the penalty is sort of like negative infinity, right? It's sort of like a Pascal's wager type thing, where like the upside is like, sort of maybe limited, but the downside is like infinite, right? So if you're any, and this is like a tough thing, right? Because like it kind of forces you into this box, right? You have a 1 in a million probability of a negative infinity event, and like how do you budget for that? How do you work around that? That's like sort of like the essence of nukes. And people talk about the mutually assured destruction thing a lot. That's a popular thing that people talk about, but I forget who else put this out there. But there's another theory that like that mutually assured destruction actually encourages more small conflicts, because it sort of like the power with like the nukes just has like the knowledge that the other nuclear powers aren't going to do anything because they have the nukes, and it sort of gives them this known window within certainty operate, right? Like nobody thinks that the US is going to launch nukes if Putin invades Ukraine, right? It's like a 0 probability event, and he can know that because he's got nukes. So because that's the case, it makes him more likely to sort of do this, right? It's like this like really weird chess game. I don't know how to solve it. I'm just riffing about it.
Yeah, I think, it's important to understand why Putin might bring up something like this other than the leverage. And I mentioned this in our thread together, but, Russia in general is a one-trick pony. And even Obama labeled Russia as a one-trick pony. The only thing it's got going for it is that it has a ton of oil. And it's a one-trick economy. So there's nothing superpower about Russia other than it has oil. It's got a ton of land. And then thirdly, that it has nukes. And so he wants to assert Russia's superpower, and I think it's its way to flex that muscle, even though outside of that it really doesn't exist.
Well, it's now or never, right? Because the entire nation is just built on energy, right? And not the kind that we're doing in the future, the kind that we're all moving away from. It's just energy and some like natural resources. So like, and they have nothing else. The country has nothing else. So it's sort of like now or never. Like in the long run, what is Russia's game plan? Like I don't see it. It's kind of like this like kind of desperate one last gasp for glory, before I kick the bucket. And he certainly seems scared of dying. Like if you've seen the videos of him at the long tables, like 100 feet away from everybody. There's a lot of rumors that he's like terrified of COVID. He refuses to get vaccinated because he's like worried of somebody like poisoning him. Projection, classic.
Can Ukraine defend itself, like with no military help from EU or NATO or United States? Like can they defend themselves? And even if they can't, like is that something that Russia wants to rule, if they like just destroy a country like into oblivion? Like is that something they're going to rule? Like
we're talking end game, like where does this eventually go down?
Right.
I mean, I think it's clear that we are helping them militarily, just because we don't have boots on the ground. I mean, we are supplying them lethal weapons, specifically those Javelin missiles that, kill tanks and I think the Stinger missiles that can go after helicopters. So we are supplying the military. We're doing all but going there and pulling the trigger for them. And I think NATO and EU as a whole is thinking like, if we can keep resupplying them, they've shown that they got the guts to execute. Now, what will happen in the end run? I don't know. I think it's a matter of if, or excuse me, a matter of when rather than if they'll be able to take Kiev. I mean, they have what is like a 40-mile, line of, and they haven't even deployed, half of the resources that they've put on the border. So I think, the end game is that at least what Putin wants is to take over Kiev, install a pro-Russian government, and kind of stop the move towards the EU, towards NATO. But like we saw in 2014, like we mentioned earlier, is that the citizens won't put up with it. And so I think you're gonna end up with, like, let's say he does do that, you're gonna end up with a quagmire of like almost like civil unrest, civil war. And the question for the United States and, Western Europe is, so what do we do then? Like, let's say he establishes some kind of order with a pro-Russian government and there isn't necessarily fighting, but there's civil unrest. Do we establish relations again? Do we reach some kind of agreement, with them to pull off sanctions and let the, Russian people kind of grow as an economy again? And is it a deal where we gave up some part of Eastern Ukraine, as part of a deal? So I think it turns into a huge quagmire, and he's got very little options because the citizens will protest and even fight, and sanctions may not be lifted even if he installs a pro-Russian government. So
yeah, he's got like this is why I think it's like
solution.
Super likely that he sort of like will take any deal that sort of involves like the Ukraine, like guarantees the Ukraine, because like he has to be looking ahead and knowing like he's not going to want to expend all these resources ruling some like insurgent populace while all these sanctions are going on back home. So I think if he gets like a scenario where like the sanctions sort of go away, or at least severe sanctions go away, and maybe some are kept on for leverage, but in exchange there's sort of a guarantee that Ukraine never joins NATO, never joins the EU, then like maybe he can kind of chalk that up as a win. And he could also sort of establish that like everybody has to recalibrate now, because everybody thought, I mean, I know that we talked like a few weeks back like that this was obviously going to happen, but like most everybody out there was like, this is very surprising. Like nobody expected this. And that's like a big win for Putin in the long run, right? Because it means that everybody has to be totally recalibrated to like what he can do, right? It's an enormous advantage if your opponents think that you're capable of this like huge variety of actions and are really uncertain about like what you're going to do. It's much to your detriment if they can narrow down all of your potential actions into this tiny little bubble and you're boxed in. So that seems like a win-win for everybody, right? Like if we can kind of de-escalate, he gets what he wants, we sort of get what we want, people stop dying. But then we have to kind of like go forward and think about like, well, what does that mean for the world? Like, what do we do in the future? Like, I want to get your thoughts on this, because this is like isolationism, I feel like is very in vogue now. Like everybody that you talk to is like, all these wars are a mistake. We never should have done any of them. We shouldn't be spending any money abroad because we have people starving at home. We have people in poverty at home. We have all of these like, cities where like kids are growing up and they're totally screwed. All like healthcare is just a myriad of problems. So we shouldn't do anything abroad. We shouldn't fight in any of these wars. This is like something I've struggled with, because I obviously see that we've wasted incredible amounts of resources and blood and treasure, right? But also like just from, again, like I think a game theory perspective, like I think it is very dangerous. And like this has happened in the past where America is sort of like withdrawn from the world and sort of created power vacuums. And in the short run, we save like all these resources, but maybe in the long run, we have to fight like even bloodier wars, even more horrific wars that could have like been prevented with like a little bit of resources, a little bit of that, right? So I'm curious what you think, Nick, since you're my foreign policy god.
Let's go into this as a topic in general.
Yeah,
I think let's skip China and go into this kind of interventionism, isolationism kind of topic, because it is really interesting. And then let's transition into how this is affecting the crypto markets and what's going on there, because we could do this for 3 hours. So yeah, Nick, like, I mean, what's the balance there between isolationism and intervention?
Yeah, what are you? Are you? How would you describe yourself? You're not a
Put
you're not a
yourself in a box for
neocon, and
us.
you're not an isolationist. I think from my conversations with you, but you're probably somewhere in the.
I mean, I think we're finding this balance right now, right? Where, and I'm reading while we're talking, I'm kind of following the ticker of the State of the Union, and Biden straight up said we're not going to get involved militarily, right? But I think we're realizing that we have alternate methods of kind of using them as weapons. So we're, sanctions are a big part of it, supplying weapons, aid. I mean, literally crippling their economy is almost just as a useful tool. So I think the balance is, let's not get involved in these wars. I think that helps, like any leader of a world domestically, to say we're not going to get involved militarily. You're not going to have sons or daughters, with boots on their ground in other countries dying and shedding blood, but we will use other resources. And the important part of this is right? And this is where Trump was part of the isolationists, we're going to stick to America first, but I don't think he had the other part, which you need alliances in order to execute that more broadly, and make sure that the countries that do want to move towards a more, democratic political system, that want to move open market and kind of move towards capitalism, even if it is imperfect, you do need those alliances. And we're seeing the amount of money and the resources and time over decades that we've put into NATO, we've put into, our alliances with European countries. They're bearing fruit right now, right? Where we can stand united and set off this, I've called it like a set of mousetraps before. If you cross these lines, there will be a series of economic mousetraps that will be set off that will harm your country more than you could ever imagine. And you don't necessarily need your own military to get involved. So you need these alliances. So I guess I'm a globalist in terms of the alliances, but you don't need, the U.S. kind of being military of the world to kind of enforce this. So pro alliances, but I think every U.S. citizen's pretty tired of wars, and maybe that's the reason that Putin started this in the first place. He saw how we exited Afghanistan, saw that Biden was weak domestically, and said, "Hey, this is an opportune time." But what he underestimated was that his own evil actions would unite NATO, where he thought he had, created some fractures, and frankly, where Trump had created fractures in between our alliances as well. But it's nice to see that everyone kind of falling in line against a clear enemy. So I don't know. That's kind of where I see the balance and the importance of alliances play out.
Yeah, it is really interesting.
I think his root miscalculation, I think, seems to be how much that the kind of non-governing populace would kind of latch onto this. I think there's been so many videos and stories and everything shared on social media about this, and there's just this unanimous sort of animosity towards him in Russia that's formed. People feel very strongly about this. It's not some distant conflict that people they're seeing it in their feed all the time, and I think politicians are very perceptive that there is that pressure from the populace there. They're motivated to do that. In spite, he was sort of calculating that he had the leverage because of the energy, right?
Yep.
And maybe that is true to an extent, but unless he's playing 4D chess here and we're not seeing enough moves ahead, it does seem like he's overplayed his hand a little bit. But as you said, I wonder if we had to be here in the first place. It seems incredibly obvious to me and a lot of other people I know that every nefarious power in the world, if they're going to make a move, is going to make a move now during the Biden presidency, during COVID, during a time when the populace is stressed, during a time when all of these things are sort of kind of coming along. And could we have prevented that? Did withdrawing from Afghanistan kind of precipitate this domino for falling? And even if we get out of this, is this going to cause the Taiwan domino to fall? And then are we going to look back and right now, our lesson is collectively oh, we shouldn't have spent all this money in these dumb wars in the Middle East, right? but these pendulums swing back and forth, right? Are we going to be sitting here like 3 decades from now being like, oh God, that was so dumb. Why didn't we just spend 10 billion a year to maintain a presence in Afghanistan? Oh, that was so dumb. Why didn't we just like act a little more strongly here? Not like be like Trump-esque, but just like not be so obvious that we could be like walked all over to start the conflict. They wouldn't have to react to it. That's kind of like my worry. And I'm still thinking through all this, but I do fear like the wave of isolationism. I do fear if it goes too far that we're sort of like mortgaging the future to feel better in the present, and we have like the illusion of like accomplishing things, but like to the detriment of our long-term goals, you know?
Yeah, well, you can thank Putin for, kind of reuniting everyone on the alliance front, and seeing the benefits of it.
It's crazy, like war's ability to unite people. It's kind of scary as well, but it is crazy. It's like such human nature, to want to rally around the flag, rally around a cause or something like that. That's why people use it for nefarious ends, I guess.
Armand, which way do you want to go? Because like I do think the Taiwan question has come up a bit now that people see what Russia's doing, but we can also go into like the go into.
I think I think there's like interesting things to talk about here in terms of like, so we've seen that we have this like worldwide dollar hegemony, right? Like the dollar is like a weapon that can be wielded, and it has been wielded here in a way that maybe it's never been wielded before. And the world might not be the same after this. And I think it brings up a lot of like really interesting thoughts, and I'll just throw some stuff out there for us to maybe discuss. I think obviously there's a lot of temptation on Twitter to kind of tie this all back to Bitcoin in some particular way. And I've seen all sorts of takes from like, the dollar hegemony system is sort of basically encouraging wars. Monetary policy encourages wars. And on the other end of the spectrum, it's like, what would this have looked like if the entire world was on a Bitcoin standard and like everybody was using like monetary rails that like couldn't be shut down and Russia could just operate like business as usual? Like that's not something I hear people talking about a lot. Like obviously I'm a Bitcoin fan, but like I'm also a skeptic, and I don't want to be like delusional about anything. Like what does this look like if everybody's using Bitcoin? This happens like 100 years from now. What do we do? Do we end up being forced into violence because like we can't use these other measures?
Well, where I get stuck in the Bitcoin argument is, how do you trade it to stable coins at some point? How do you actually make it usable? And beyond, every vendor in every country accepting Bitcoin, how do you get it? So I actually still think it's only a store of value play. Like Russia, can avoid sanctions and keep some of its value in Bitcoin and keep that value. But when it comes to practical uses for using it,
it is now. But imagine the future. Imagine Bitcoin is $100 trillion asset, as some people
You're saying if it's
romantically
actually
predict.
Like what the
imagine it is. Imagine so like for example, like everybody's talking about how, oh my God, Russia's going to use crypto and we're going to ban. I think that's like silly, right? What are their reserves? Like $800 billion, right? Even if they put 1% of their reserves into Bitcoin, the market would like blow up. They'd be the largest Bitcoin holder. How do they get the fiat on ramps to do, like, there's all these logistics questions, right? So that to me isn't like a big concern, like in the here and now. And I think Russia has been building reserves for years. They've been planning this for years, and they chose to not use Bitcoin, right? So that to me is kind of silly. But in like an alternate future world where Bitcoin is $100 trillion asset, right? And getting like $1 trillion of liquidity into it is maybe doable. Buying 1% of it is doable. It is something you could do. But then what does the world look like? What does the world look like when everybody's using these payment rails that can't be censored, that can't be shut down? There's not like one sort of global reserve currency that's controlled by a central benevolent power, right? Like, what do we do in this situation? Is that actually a bad thing?
No, but you have to use a crypto bank, which, Armand, we've talked about becoming banks, and because they're a crypto bank, they can be regulated and sanctioned and have to follow these lawful requests to shut people down. You can't trade it into fiat or trade it to a stable coin. So Are you saying that we would eventually grow beyond that because the market cap is so big and it's not an issue? There's some decentralized way.
It's very easy to envision in the future, right? That like you're saying like, oh, we can't do that. You're mentioning all of these like intermediaries and payment rails and centralized things that like the Swift system or credit cards, like all the like the wires, like all of this stuff, like that may go away. Like it's not hard to envision in the future that everybody go for it.
Can I jump in? Okay. And I don't know where this would actually tie into the agenda. So as the person who was watching, who wants the agenda, I'm sorry, but we'll come back to it. So the philosophical question that Stephen is asking is, it's a philosophical one. It's what does the world actually look like in the future when the world reserve currency is Bitcoin, when the predominant currency that is exchanged in each nation is Bitcoin, when we don't have the JP Morgan Chases, or at least maybe not in the way that we envision them today. We don't have the payment systems of today. We have something completely different, which is the government and the individual playing in the same game, which is a decentralized Bitcoin wallet game. And the question being, if conflict arises between nations, how do we condemn those actions and how do we sanction the actions of it? Like, can we, or are we forced and pulled into conflict automatically? And that current sort of tool that we have in our little toolbox of being able to turn off the assets or freeze the assets of another nation, which is exactly what the US is doing now, is not possible because we believe in a world of cold storage, hard wallets, and owning your own keys. So this is a great philosophical question. I have no fucking idea, Stephen. Well,
I reject the premise of both your guys' questions and refuse to answer.
I don't understand the question, and I refuse to.
I understand the question. I don't even think it's like in the realm of possibilities for the same reasons you stated. It just won't.
It is literally the world that every Bitcoiner gets on every podcast and like muses about to everybody. Like this is like the Bitcoin utopia, like a world where Bitcoin's the reserve currency and all these evil fiat currencies go away and everything is permissionless. And I'm just like wondering, like, is that really a utopia? Or like, what does that play out like if this situation happens in that world? It's like, it's worth thinking about, I think.
Right. Does it make human coordination harder or easier? I think it makes it harder. It makes it harder. And like for that reason, I don't think it's a possible outcome. Like to Nick, I'm on team Nick on this one. It's like that's not the logical outcome for that reason. But I do think that like Bitcoin is going to be an incredible store of value. Like I want to hold more and more Bitcoin, of course. But I don't think that that's like
what's more likely is these central bank digital currencies, and then they come with a whole host of really scary consequences as well.
Yes.
So it's like
good point.
What's the better play here? I think that a central bank would prefer that, would definitely prefer to be in control, and that would inevitably lead them down a slippery slope of more authoritarianism and control and centralized sort of like top-down policy and being able to wipe out individuals at a moment's notice. And then that enables you to become more and more authoritarian if people are not aligned with your values. So they're not going to want this like permissionless network. And then it seems like it goes from the bottom up, right? It's not good for the individual. In some sense, it's the best thing ever for the individual, right? But it's also not good for the country because then when countries get into conflict, the same thing, to Stephen's point, arises.
But doesn't that seem much more likely, like what you just presented, like the central bank digital currency method?
I think it's more likely. Yeah, I think both of those outcomes are scary. One outcome is just like a really terrible, like terrifying, like financial authoritarianism, right? I mean, we saw that play out in Canada last couple of weeks. Like imagine they didn't have to do all this. Imagine they just clicked a couple numbers on a keyboard and they're like, oh, you have unacceptable views. All your money belong to us. And then that's it, right? That's terrifying, right? That type of centralized control is terrifying. But it's also terrifying to completely degrade back into like anarchy basically, where everybody's sovereign individuals. But then we've like a long time ago, we organized to have these institutions, right, to sort of protect things that we like about life and society, right? So losing that completely, losing the ability to have these choke points are useful in instances like this, right? So losing them completely is also bad. So I wonder what the
I think that's the
magic
question.
balance is going to be.
Let's actually.
It's like so many other things in life, right? You need both things. You need the yin, you need the yang. Like people think they want only the yin, or they think they want only the yang. But most of human existence is like humans just have a tendency to just go off the rails one way or another, and that like we've evolved in this weird way where there's different personalities balance other personalities, particular political ideologies balance other political. It's all about like checks and balances, and like I think we need to maintain the check and the balance, right? So that's what we need to
are the
optimize
answer.
for.
Radical moderates crushing purple pills.
That's a little
living in the gray.
Little bit of a god complex there. Pull it
I
back.
love it. I don't mind it.
But
I don't know if us four are the answer, but I think maybe like what we just came to is the answer. It's like there will be Bitcoin and there will be central bank digital currencies. Right. So let's talk about how that future looks, and let's talk about that sort of like risky future, because I think that is the likely outcome. It's not going to be one or the other.
For sure. It's got to be a hybrid ultimately, and I think that what it is ultimately an argument against maximalism or being a hardcore evangelist of any one idea, which we've talked about many times on the pod. Really, ultimately, it's about capturing the best ideas and blending them up, and understanding that blend and that gray space that you operate in creates the yin and the yang that Stephen is alluding to. I do think it's important to get a little bit practical because we've been a little bit philosophical here for a bit. Can we shift gears on that? Is that okay? Because I don't know how much more we can really dig into this.
I'll allow it.
Thank you. Thank you, my lord. So look, like what people really care about right now, and I think what a lot of people are confused about, and Eric, I'm curious if you have any insight on this. The market is doing really weird things right now. So I think we've concluded that Vlad didn't go and buy like billions of dollars of Bitcoin, and that's not what caused the pump. So what is possibly going on here? Because we had a bloodbath, huge crash, and then all of a sudden we're up 15%, as you said, in the span of a couple days. How do we explain this?
So I don't know if you guys follow Sam Bankman-Fried on Twitter, but he had a great thread on what he's seeing in the market. And what he said was that like within, like, let's just use Bitcoin as an example. Like we have a fundamental versus technical sort of conflict as people look at Bitcoin. So the technical guys would say that, Bitcoin was correlated to the market, but it had like a magnified effect. So they call that like beta. So as the stock market went down 4%, Bitcoin would go down 16%. And they would call that a beta of 4 because it was 4 times the magnitude of the market. But then as the market went down 8%, Bitcoin was down 16%. So that was like a muted beta. The beta went to 2 from 4. So what we're seeing now is like a complete decoupling where the market is flat and Bitcoin's up 15%. So what I look at is what Sam Bankman-Fried was describing is like a fundamental versus technical sort of fight, as the fundamentalists say, like, well, now here's a pretty clear use case for Bitcoin as like, sanctions come into play, and like now we want to like avoid the SWIFT network or whatever. So you have like this fundamental play, and then the technicals are saying like, well, the beta used to be 4. But now it's not a beta of 4, but that creates a regime change. So the regime change means that on the technical side, it's no longer that same beta of 4. So like now the technical guys are changing their stance. So we're watching like a regime change happen in real time. So like the technicals are changing right in front of us. the fundamentals have always existed, but it's maybe becoming more and more clear. So what I'm seeing is like, it's either like fundamentals are coming more into focus, or the technicals are just changing right in front of us. So like, Bitcoin is now up 15% on the week while stock market is flat. Is that the new technicals? Like, does that suggest that, it's a brand new technical regime, or is this just the fundamentals sort of like taking the spotlight? I'm not exactly sure. And that I think that's just a way I would look at it.
I think when we talk about this stuff, like people need to understand that there's like so much going on in the market in the background that they don't even know exists, right? This is especially true once you start talking about like derivatives and options, right? And squeezes. Like if like a particular, if there's like a bunch of shorts, for example, right? And those shorts kind of get offsides, and savvy market participants can sort of realize that they can sort of push the price up by, realizing that those shorts are offsides, and then sort of causing like cascading liquidations, right? When there are options trading, there's like heavy options trading, like you have like hedging that takes place in the market. You get gamma squeezes around expiration dates, and like this is all like really enhanced by the volatility of like war and everything like that. So we may be seeing a signal here. I'm not saying we're not, right? But also like people should always not read too much into sort of like short-term volatility and like really volatile world events. Although I do concede that the move we saw yesterday was like very, very, very big. I just feel like my gut is just still telling me that I don't think that this is like a magic bottom for Bitcoin and we just go up from here. That there's just like so many headwinds for the rest of the year. It's a little bit scary to me. I think that like the most important thing for somebody to realize in this market, we joke about this in crypto Twitter a lot. We talk about like a PVE versus PVP, and it's sort of like a gaming reference, right? So when the market's PVE, right, versus PVP is like player versus player, right? The implication being that it's like a zero sum game. I'm fighting with you for alpha, right? We're in a PvP market right now. Last year we were in a PvE market, right? Like anybody could play it. It was positive sum. There was so much money coming into the market from outside that if you just play, like everybody made money, even if you bought bad coins. But now it's like a bloodbath. Like people are fighting against each other. You're seeing more rugs. You're seeing more like bad NFT projects. You're seeing more scams. You're really seeing people like go at each other's throats. And I don't think people should stay out of crypto right now because there's like obviously a lot of opportunity when this happens. But like if you are a low information person, like you have a very high probability of getting wrecked unless you just buy like ETH and Bitcoin, right? Because like there's not really any PvP going on with like BTC and ETH, right? It's like these are the blue chips. Like you're making these long-term plays. You're not trying to like outsmart everybody, especially if you know that you're like not like a high information person, right? So I don't have any problem with buying right now, but like people should know that it is a knife fight out there. It's like pretty brutal. So if you want to play the game, just know that before going in,
I have a question. I'm curious what more bearish looks like. So we have, an insane inflation print, 7.5%. Commodity prices are super high on the consumer. You got a ton of rate hikes priced in. We're not doing quantitative easing. We're kind of like trimming that those asset purchases by the Fed. And we have war going on. So like there's all these like bear cases. And typically when you try to spot bottoms is when everyone is bearish. So what does more bearish look like? I agree that people are getting reminded of the fundamentals of Bitcoin and financial sovereignty, and maybe there's still bulls there. But who else is there left to sell at this point?
I think there's a lot of people left to sell at this
point. There's so much froth. There's so much froth still. Like we're on such a, like the S&P alone is still up 12% over last year. So like it's still up. Like we're still up. That's like, I think if I was sitting in the chair of of like the Fed inner circle. I would be looking at, like speculative shit coins and like the stock equivalent of that, and be like, yeah, so those drop 60%. Like that's healthy. Like that's probably healthy long term, and those still have plenty of room to fall. Not to mention, like, Apple at trillions of dollars and Amazon trillions of dollars. Like these have plenty of room to fall. Like we haven't even gone negative on the S&P on a 1 year time frame. Like I think there's still plenty of room for downside in your like bearish scenario, which I think is sort of the thesis of where I stand on like why I think ETH probably has room to go down in the immediate term, but like prior to the merge.
Yeah, like the Fed still today, I think, is still buying like a lot, like every day, right? So we haven't even got. I know some of this gets priced in ahead of time and whatnot, but like I know that studies have shown that like after the first tightening, right, like a couple months after in these like kind of periods is when you kind of hit like the peak kind of despair and failure point, and those tend to be like good like buy opportunities on like multi-year time horizons. I hear what you're saying, Nick, and it's something I think about a lot too, because I always want to buy when everybody's like super bear, because it's just like, all right, I like being a contrarian, but as somebody who's lived through multiple 90% drawdowns in like ETH and Bitcoin, right? Not even like total dog shit, like it's very possible. And I am encouraged because I look in the market and there is a lot of stuff that has already gone down 90%. We are like really, culling the herd right now. We are like kind of burning off these like shit projects and just really getting a lot of the crap out of the system. So I think it's a fine time to start buying, because picking bottoms is a fool's errand. Like I don't think anybody here is good enough to pick a bottom, but that doesn't mean like you can't have like eyes wide open about how bad it could still get, right? Like the bottom for ETH is probably like $500 or $600, right? Not like 2,100. And that would be pretty brutal for somebody who buys right here. Like you're still going to lose like almost 90%, right? Like if that happens like today, right? That'd be nuts, after everybody's like, oh, it's 50% off, huge discount. And then you lose like 80%, 90%, right? That's really nasty. So you have to be mentally prepared for that. But it's not like these like massive like 100x gains just come for free. Like everybody who got one of those gains bought at like a really difficult time when nobody else believed, and it wasn't like an easy play. Like you don't make those gains in like a bull market when everybody's just like having a party, So
right.
That's how I look at it.
I mean, speaking of that, I think for people that are buying, like one thing that's been coming up, and this was in the agenda, was around interventions, and like what's going on with the power of crypto in general with Ukraine. So when it comes to these interventions, I just want to comment on it really quick, because I think it's important for people to know. So, Nick, you put this crypto banks turning into banks, getting requests. Can you break this down a little bit and why it matters to like an individual crypto investor?
Yeah. So, we have these centralized entities like Coinbase or FTX or BlockFi or Celsius. Some listeners may have, some of their cryptocurrency with them.
It's where we all have to buy, where you start. Yeah.
Right. And, they have to follow laws just like anyone else. For anyone who's centralized and not decentralized, where there's a company running the rules, they have to follow the laws. And so I think we'll see, just because you have crypto doesn't necessarily mean you're immune to some of these seizures or sanctions. Not that, US citizens would be, but just globally speaking, you're not free from them. And just because you have crypto, if it's in a crypto bank, which is a bank, you're not totally a sovereign individual financially speaking. And so I think, in the last week, we've come to realize that. And it begs the argument, like, well, where are we truly sovereign? And for me, it comes to like the fiat on ramps are tough, specifically with Bitcoin. But I think with Ethereum, there is a little more of financial sovereignty and freedom, because you have ETH and a fully decentralized protocol. And not only can you take ETH, which we consider hard money, a hard asset that is going to be deflationary and going to produce a yield and going to be an asset that helps fund this new settlement layer, you can trade those to stable coins. And as stable coins become more broadly accepted amongst asset holders, it may be more broadly accepted amongst vendors. You may find that there are vendors, and may not be your landlord or the bank who's holds your mortgage, but you may find that some investments will take stablecoin, some vendors and service providers may take stablecoin, and that to me is maybe a more viable path to financial sovereignty than Bitcoin, which sounds weird because that's the whole use case. And Stephen made the point that these intermediate logistics will get taken care of in the long run, but in the short term, I feel more sovereign with ETH for some reason.
Yeah, and I feel like it's important to just give like a very simple explanation for someone that's new to this concept of the centralized crypto exchanges and whatnot. So the point is, like, look, there's the idea of like having a custodian, which exists in the traditional finance world as well, and then you being the custodian, something being non-custodial. So for anyone that has any significant amount of crypto, the point that Nick is making right now, the point that really is being illuminated right now, and the point that the CEO of one of these centralized exchanges where you can buy your crypto right now, Kraken or whatever the fuck Jesse Powell said, is that, look, he issued a warning, and I read this right before, is like, if the government says freeze your accounts for any reason because you participated in the Freedom Convoy, which we talked about in the last episode, or whatever reason they give me, I have to follow suit. So what does that mean? You purchased your crypto on a centralized exchange. You don't have to keep it there. They're the custodian of your crypto, but you don't have to keep it there. And we have a famous saying in crypto in general where we say, not your keys, not your wallet. And so the point is, like, you need to be in charge of your keys, and your keys are stored on your hardware wallet if you want to take that ownership. With that ownership comes a lot of responsibility, meaning that if you run into trouble with Coinbase, you can call them up, you can message them and hit up their help center, and they'll help you out because they are the custodian of your crypto. They're storing your keys. But if you move that to a hardware wallet, which is the recommended way to do it, you remove that responsibility. You put that onus of responsibility on yourself. And that cost, I think, in our opinion, is worth it. If I can speak for all of us, I think it's worth it because it's like learning the system and learning how to be responsible for your financial well-being is what this whole game is all about. Crypto is freedom, the ability to live and operate in a permissionless peer-to-peer network, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum, it doesn't matter. You have to own your keys. You have to be in charge of your wallet. So if you're listening, you got to move your crypto off Coinbase and onto, at the very least, a hot wallet like MetaMask, but at the best case scenario, a hardware wallet like a Ledger or a Trezor. I just wanted to make sure we touch on that because I know that's new for a lot of people.
Can I blow up your spot a little bit?
Sure.
I actually had this conversation. I had this conversation with my mom a couple of weeks ago because she was like concerned because she heard about the freezing of the bank accounts in Canada, and she's like, "I got to take my Bitcoin off of Coinbase," and I was like, "Do not do that. Do not do that. Like, this is like a simple math equation for you. Your odds of screwing something up and self-custodying, although I think it's ideal, right? Your odds of screwing something up and self-custodying are they're orders of magnitude higher than the odds that the U.S. government
Hold on, Steven,
comes and takes your Bitcoin.
You are the DeFi lord. You're not doing this for her. There should be no odds of screwing it up. Her son should do it for her. That's the answer.
I can't self-custody for her. That's like inherently it is an inherent violation of the definition of self-custody. self-custody. Like,
Look, like
I suppose if I wanted to go like way
clients.
ham, like I could like set up like a multi-sig or something for her. But like the reality of the situation is that
I'm
like
sorry,
people
I would argue
shouldn't.
against that. It's really not that
People
hard
should not.
anymore.
People should not self-custody if they don't know, if they're not like capable of it, because their odds of losing their Bitcoin.
Anybody can go.
I'm
on
glad this is a
Ledger's
controversial
YouTube.
opinion.
No, anybody
Steven-
can go on
Steven is right here.
ledger.com. No,
My
hold
mom
on,
can't
Brett.
go on YouTube
Hold on.
and figure out how like to log into TikTok, right? She like it's like self-custodying Bitcoin.
Average person we're
is-
talking to is our age, tech savvy, can go to YouTube, watch a few videos, and figure out how to use a hardware wallet. That's who we're speaking to. That's
If that's a desire, right? Like if you hold Bitcoin as like a financial portfolio diversifier versus you hold Bitcoin for the outside chance that you may need to be self-sovereign someday. If you hold Bitcoin for the latter reason, then yeah, you're kind of a fool if you just keep all your Bitcoin on Coinbase and you don't do the work for self-custody. But if it's like a 1% portfolio allocation and it's purely a financial thing and you're not that like tech savvy, like I don't know, like I am a little bit of a purist at heart, but I'm also like a realist. And I think like people are really bad at stuff. I have personally seen so many of my friends like light multiple Bitcoins on fire, just doing the dumbest shit that would have never happened. Like if they were just logging into Coinbase, like you wouldn't believe the stuff I've witnessed. It's like crazy. Like I had a friend who shall remain nameless who had like close to $1 million of coins on a wallet on his phone. And it wasn't a wallet that's like you log in with a password. It was like a wallet with keys. And he updated his phone and then couldn't find the password to log back in again. And then didn't realize that like there's no login and password for it. And he lost like, fortunately, most of those were shit coins and they're probably only worth like 50 grand now. But at the time it was like close to $1 million of like coins just poof gone because he just didn't fully grasp the ramifications of self-custody. So that's like what I fear.
okay.
I'm with Armand.
Yin and yang, though, right? Like yin and yang. Like
I agree that we should all strive for what you're saying. We should all strive for it.
if you have more than $25,000, $50,000, move it off, and take
what we're
the
talking
risk that Steven is talking about.
What we're talking about is like economic Darwinism here. Like at some point you got to learn, and you know the people who are willing enough to figure it out, you know, their economic genes will survive this like little educational gap here. And I don't know. I think it's important for people to buy that $300, $200 hardware wallet and learn, and maybe don't learn with all of it. Learn with like 5% of it first.
Yes.
Get comfortable
That's
with
what
it.
I
Keep
did.
95% in Coinbase.
Yeah.
So I think we're all in the mode of like helping people.
It's what Satoshi intended, guys.
Right.
You can't
And
be
I think
like
we're all in the trying to
leaving
progress
it on
people
Coinbase.
along this path. It's not about like you know, being a little
You
nihilistic.
should should progress along the path. You absolutely should. I totally believe, but I have seen the maxis just like berating people on Twitter. Not your keys, not your coins, not your keys, not your coins. And there are a lot of people who come into the space and they just feel like, oh my God, like if I don't do this, I'm a complete moron. I have to put all my coins on here. I got to do it. They feel pressured and they make mistakes, or they don't educate themselves first, right? So I think everything everybody's saying here is like accurate. Like everybody should absolutely strive to do that, but don't feel like you're a bad person if you don't. Don't feel like you have to do that, or it's all for naught. You're totally screwed. But like if you take it at all seriously and you want to learn, you should learn slowly, incrementally, as Nick said, with a little bit, and then strive to put it all on there.
Yeah. We can't. Yeah, that was part of the assumption. But
Like
Eric looks like he wants to.
Well, just like all of my TradFi clients that want to get into crypto are facing the same dilemma, and they have no idea how to be self-sovereign and how to custody their own assets. So they're looking to me
want you to do it,
be the custodian. And like, it's the same problem. It's like, like none of these folks are equipped or ready or, capable, at least right now, to do it. So like, I agree with Steven wholeheartedly. It's like, you don't have to, you can hold your money in Coinbase and be fine. And that's what I advise. So like, I agree with sort of everyone here. That's like, ideal world, you do have your own custody of everything, but it's like how much do you really expect people to be able to do this stuff? Like, they're oftentimes safer not.
I think it's important, distinction for people to understand, what you can do on a hardware wallet with Bitcoin and what you can do with Ethereum in decentralized and centralized networks. So when Bitcoin is on a hardware wallet, the only thing you do is send it to other addresses. Yeah. That's it. But with Ethereum, you can take it to decentralized networks. You can trade it for stable coins. You can then use those stable coins to pay for goods. So, I know we're talking about this,
but that is the only thing you can do with Bitcoin anyway. But
right, that makes Bitcoin better for the hardware wallet because it's just one transaction, and then you just store it, and then you have I have 100 times a day where I can screw up all of my ETH, and it is a little terrifying. I still get terrified.
ETH, Stephen.
I'm much more careful with yours than mine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Guys, I think we need to wrap. It's been a long one. It's been a good topic, a series of topics. And I think, that is really a very alfalfa type answer, honestly, on this topic. More to be revealed on this topic, but it's individual. It's different for each person. And I think ultimately, to really just summarize where we're at, it's not an easy time, guys. I just think a little bit of a virtual hug to everybody out there. I know that sounds cheesy, but I think everybody needs it right now. It's really, really, really not an easy time, and it's really stressful, and there's a lot at stake. And I mean, even the fact that we talked about nuclear in this episode is really heavy, that's not fun. And then we're talking about markets and what to do with your coins. It's kind of, sometimes it's just oh, what the fuck does it even all matter when the world is on the brink of World War III? And that's the meme going around right now, right? It's so I guess maybe if we can just close with some warm thoughts, I thought, given this topic, and we'll wrap. Mine is, take care of yourself, drink your water, do your exercise, and limit social media.
Mine is to buy the dip, because if it all goes to hell, then you won't need money anyway.
That's good. I heard this. I heard this quote. I think it's attributed to John Lennon or a Beatle. He said, "It's all going to be okay in the end, and when it's not okay, then it's not the end."
I had to bite my tongue and not go the China angle and digital yuan angle. I know I wanted to get that in, but that's not so warm and fuzzy. So I guess my warm and fuzzy is, when the market's this volatile and there's this big global shifts happening, a lot of bad financial decisions can be made, and most likely they're made on the selling side rather than the buying side. So, don't make decisions out of fear. These things happen, and there's plenty of evidence to show that after these big volatile events, sometimes the biggest gains in the year happen after these. And if you miss those gains, you will most certainly lose against the market average, the market index. So stay calm. Don't sell. Stay the course. If your thesis is right, you'll be right in the long term. So that's my warm and fuzzy to wrap it up.
I mean, Nick, if the ammo is loaded and you want to drop the digital yuan, you can. I don't know if anyone.
It's too late. We just did a nice little bow on it. I'll just save it for another time.
Yeah. Last but not least, again, reminder: we're ready. Join the Discord. Pop in. Let's have the convo. We're sharing the alfalfa. We want to meet you guys. Say hi. We want to say hi back. Head to alfalfapod.com, and the Discord link is right at the top. And these episodes are on YouTube as well. Hope you're enjoying. Drop us a comment on YouTube or wherever you see us. We would love to hear from you. Until the next time, guys. Peace.